and special thanks to Irene for putting this together. Me here as a Venezuelan, as an MIT student, I have like two things to say. In the MIT, our motto is mens et manus, is the connection between what we think and what we do, and that's very important in critical situations as the one that we are going through in Venezuela. And as a Venezuelan, I say that things like this are the ones that prove what we are made of, and not because we are not in Venezuela, we are not able to make an impact or to help to Venezuela to move forward. I don't want to get much of your time. Maina is an important guy here, and the students that are in Venezuela fighting against human rights violations. Maina, you have been in tough situations. You have received personal threats for the work you do. We all appreciate that. That's the situation that Venezuelan politicians and Venezuelan students are facing at the moment. And but that's the reason why we keep fighting against human rights violations, and that's like wood or logs to our fire. We want to keep moving forward with this, and we want to make an impact in Venezuela. So, Andreina, you can now read the statement of the Venezuelan students. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to welcome you, Maina. Thank you for being here and being so involved with what we're dealing with. And the first thing that I'm going to do right now is I'm going to read a letter that some students from Venezuela actually wrote for us on February 14th. They wrote this letter so I could, and Irene gave it to me so I could read it. The protests unleashed in recent days are the product of a deep crisis in the Venezuelan society. We will not delve into describing it, as we live it in our own flesh. We have witnessed the progressive destruction of our social, political, and economic structure, as well as the destruction of the generalized ethics. The response to our protests by the Venezuelan government have been the most brutal repression, not only directly through the PNB, National Bolivarian Police, 7, Bolivarian Intelligence Service, and the GNB, the National Guard. Additionally, as authoritarian governments and criminals have used this collective terror as paramilitary squads that pose as social organizations, even if their criminal character known. Venezuela ratifies student movement will continue in the streets in a peaceful and democratic way until our demands are met. Immediate and international brokering request to recommend to the government of Nicolás Maduro and Diosdado Cabello that meets the following requirements. First point, release all the detainees and end to repression immediately and the trials run out of facts, plus a history of rigged race our fellow students. We demand that the government cease from encouraging criminal behavior, since there can be peace and coexistence in the state if the state promotes, supports, encourages, and protects groups committing criminal acts. Third point, it is known worldwide that where the most barbarous torture against the youth, like all statements contained in, so we demand justice against those who ordered and committed such crimes and international protection of the victims. Fourth, we demand that constitute the Joint Commission of the Truth, Independent and Technical Truth Commission to investigate the murders occurred from February 12th, and uninvolved lawyers designated for that purpose. We demand respect for university autonomy, so we demand the immediate withdrawal of the police and military encirclement of universities nationwide. We demand respect for the right to peaceful protest of all Venezuelans. Established in the Constitution, no more criminalization of legitimate protests of Venezuela. We demand the immediate release of all detained for protesting and cessation trials that are not citizens of the student movement. And this is signed by the entire student movement that is leading all the protests in Venezuela. This letter was written, in case if you didn't hear, on February 14th. And in my own introduction to this event, I would like to tell you guys about a conversation that I had this morning with Feliciano, who is part of the Provea, who they promote the human rights in Venezuela. And basically we were talking to him this afternoon because he called us, and we talked about a lot of things, but I took notes of the most impacting things that I considered. And he was so emphasized in the progressive use of force by the GMB and the division of the whole country, and like as the government calls them, anti-fascist terrorists, anti-fascist territories. Like, I mean, it's not like you can protest everywhere. You can just protest in one specific place where it's not like it's only Altamira, it's only in Capital. You can't protest freely in like other places that are not like designated areas, because the other areas that the government was trying to remain peace are anti-fascist territory. So I think that this movement is not only the opposition, it's not only the officialism, it's not only the rich people, the poor people, it's everywhere. Injustice is everywhere in Venezuela, and a lot of crimes go unsolved, a lot of things happen that we don't want to happen. We want to live in a country where the Constitution is taken seriously and all the laws are completely followed. And yeah. So with this, I'm gonna introduce you to Enrique and Jamil, who are gonna talk a little bit about the inside view of the protesters, because they have been there for a while. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Sí, voy a bajarles un poquito el volumen. A ver, adelante.
Okay, since February the 12th of this year, we started making public demonstrations against the impunity and against the corruption of this government. As the speaker before me said, well, the response of the answer of the government was brutal repression. And today, to this day, we can count 59 cases of torture. And those cases are very similar. And when we analyze the situation closely enough, we can see that those cases are not spontaneous. Those were orders made by the government to torture young students. And we can see that when it becomes evident, when you see that there are more than 25 cases when apprehended students were sprayed with the gasoline, and where they punched them with a mattress around them not to have signals. We have one case of a violation with a rifle. We have several cases of psychological torture, of nudity inside the prisons, just to torture in a psychological way. Besides that, we can count to this day 2,322 people that were detainees by this government or detained by this government. Of those, more than 1,800 were students. So we are talking here about persecution to the students, because most of the demonstrations are filled with civil society, but the detainees are all students. In prison are mostly students. Besides that, in the demonstrations, we have seen more than 450 tear gas bombs thrown at us in a 2 hours period. Yes, actually in one demonstration in the Central University of Venezuela, they threw almost 1,000 tear gas bombs. Yeah, so Jamil will talk about the limitation to the civil right of protests, because our drama is that we don't have the permission to protest. Actually, we are criminalized because we protest, and we have zones, special places, and important places that we are completely
prohibited.
Yeah, prohibited and forbidden to make public demonstrations there. So, you may.
Well, hi everybody. I will try my best to speak in English. It's not my first language, so I'll do my best. My name is Jamil Hasir. I'm the president of the student government in La Universidad Católica Andrés Bello. I will try to start, before talking about how we do the demonstrations and all that at the beginning of this catastrophe and the start of the protest and the February 12th, we were just normal students. I was leading some academic projects in my college, and I will try my best to be the best student in my subject. But 2 months ago, all the leaders in our college started being leaders of the entire country. We have 20, 21, 22 years old. We are not politics, or we are not economics, or professionals. We're just kids that are fighting for their rights, liberty, and for freedom, for the democracy. So we start to manage and to start every day many protests, different kind of protests, and all of them were really dangerous. We start to see how our friends start to get killed, to get kidnapped by the government, because those detained, for me, are kidnapped. They didn't have any reason to take them. And we start to see that some of our friends were violated of their human rights, of their rights. So every time we decide go to the streets, we have many risks in it. And we have forbidden to go to one part of the city where the main government buildings are. The Congress is over there, well, the National Assembly, the ministers are over there, and which is the ombudsman over there, and many of other buildings. So every time we try to get to that zone, it was impossible for us. The National Guards put lots of barriers of tanks and barriers of a lot of guards. And at the moment we start to walk, it was the place is all over tear gas. So and tear gas, and they shoot at us with, I don't know how to say that. It's not like a gun that killed us. Well, those guns are killing us. Pretty guns.
Rubber bullets.
Rubber bullets.
Taking shots. Well, it's okay. They started shooting at us with everything. And we had about 2,000 students injured in those protests. So it was impossible for us to get to those buildings. Like 3 weeks ago, we decided that we should try another strategy to get to those buildings. Always with a non-violent way. No? Always with a fight with non-violence. And we started to manage that everybody gets into the subway, and we just talk person by person where we were going. We didn't publish it in Twitter or in the TV or in any social network, and we just appeared in the building like 1,000 students, and we made our protest for about 15-20 minutes, and it was a total success. But one day we did that, we get to the building, but we wait 5 minutes more than what was planned to stay there. One of our friends were robbed when we were trying to stay there. We stayed there like half an hour only. One of our friends were robbed. 4 of the girls that were there got injured, and we just ran out of the place. For us, that was a truly success, because nobody was or kidnapped, or killed, or really arrested. But it actually was terrible that we cannot protest in a civil way, in a pacific way, in almost all the parts of the city. So the government is criminalizing protest, and it's really hard for us to continue after 2 months of protest in the streets, because the cost of it is really high. Well, we will continue in the streets. The government every time is more weak. The people every time support us a lot more than 2 months ago. The support of everybody, of the civils, of the people, of the mothers, fathers, of everybody, every time is bigger. This is not only a student protest, this is a protest that belongs to everybody. Not only the protests that the students lead are the ones that are happening in Venezuela right now. There are many groups that are protesting without a student leader, because the society, the poor society, is getting affected for all the problems that we're suffering right now in Venezuela. So yeah, this is what's happening in Venezuela is really bad. It's a total violation of the human rights. But we will continue to fight for liberty, for justice, and for democracy, because we want we believe that our future has been kidnapped, and we want to take it back.
We have a great amount of danger and of fear within ourselves, but in the end, our convictions to democracy, to freedom, they are stronger than the fear or than the danger we are in. Because in the end, Venezuela has a civil and a republican tradition. And within our people is the memory of our great fathers, of our founding fathers. And we cannot just deny that tradition. And well, one of the worst things that are happening in Venezuela is the complete denial of our reasons to protest. The government calls us fascists, Nazis, or whatever. They just throw, although the repression in a physical way, in a psychological way, we have campaigns in the public television of Venezuela against us, against all the students, calling ourselves violent, and trying to say that we are just manipulated by some groups. That's a total lie. I myself, I am the president of the Universidad Monte Ávila Center of Students, and we are just making these demonstrations because we have convictions, and we cannot tolerate, we cannot allow all these injustices in the Venezuelan society. And that is why the Venezuelan people is waking up and is fighting for their rights.
Ok, gracias. Ok, gracias. ¿Pueden oírme?
Sí.
Sí. Ok, ahora vamos a continuar con la agenda. Ustedes se pueden quedar escuchando para que después puedan tomar las preguntas. So we're going to go to the next speaker. And the reason why we're here in front of the computer, because the audio is better through the computer. So I'm going to bring a chair and I'm going to invite our next speaker, Juan Andrés Mejía, de Voluntad Popular. Okay,
Awesome.
And then in the background you will be seen in our computer. Okay, go ahead. So we're going to welcome Juan Andrés Mejía.
¿Pueden poner su micrófono en mute, por favor?
Sí.
So Irene has asked me to sit here in order to speak to the computer.
Thank you.
It's like a public Skype session.
Well, thank you very much for being here, everyone. Thank you, Irene, for organizing this, and everyone that has put a lot of effort into inviting us today. Thank you, Irene, for helping, and Jamil and Enrique for telling us what's going on in Venezuela on a daily basis, which is what they just described. I will do my best to be short, to not speak too long. If I'm going over time, just let me know. So, well, they explained, Maina, thank you very much. I mean, it's an honor to be able to speak to you and to have you among us today. We don't have many opportunities to tell the world what's going on in Venezuela. We don't have media available, free media available to communicate what's going on. The last few years we have seen how independent media has been shut down. The press doesn't even have enough paper to publish the newspaper that they are supposed to publish every day. So this is very important for us. Well, I just want to remind you that this all began because kids like them, students, I was a student leader 5 years ago, and I was also arrested 5 years ago, were just protesting, and they were brutally repressed. Not only by the police, and this is new. This has happened. This didn't happen before. They were also repressed by armed people. We call the paramilitary groups that are supported by the government. I mean, they have never been called up to the authorities. They have never been sent up to jail. I mean, they're supported by the government. So the first day of the protest, 2 people were killed. One, a member of this paramilitary groups, and one was a student. And the government automatically said that it was the opposition's fault, and they blamed some of the opposition leaders for the deaths. Now we know that it was not actually the opposition, it was policemen who shot at them. And they have been sent to jail, I mean. But this is the reason that everything began. I'm pretty sure that if that day these people were not killed, I mean, this probably would have been just one other protest. There was a lot of people there, but this is not the first time we have gone into the streets. So of course that made everyone to react and to keep protesting, and they were blaming it on us. So I mean, and from that day on, that didn't stop. It kept on going, and these paramilitary groups, supported by the police, supported by the National Guard, killed a lot of people. It is important to say, and it is important to remind everyone that not only students and protesters have been killed, also policemen have been killed, and we do not support any violence of any kind. The protests and the people that have called the protests, especially the students, but also political parties, have always reminded everyone that these are non-violent protests. But it is difficult to even protest in that sense. For example, Andreina, Maina, and Enrique mentioned it several times. It is impossible for people in Venezuela, if you're in the position, to go march to the center of the city. It's simply impossible. It's banned. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's during the week or during the weekends. There's always an excuse to not allow us to go there. And when we try to do it because we feel it's our right and we don't have to ask for permission, they simply block the streets and throw thousands of tear gas bombs against the protesters. This has, produced a lot of injuries. One guy that I know, for example, he was in one of these protests. He tried not to leave when tear gas was shot at them, and one of the tear gas bombs hit him in the eye, and he lost vision in one of his eyes. Another guy in the Táchira province, which is the province near the Colombian border, which is one of the provinces that has been hit the hardest. A person was just hitting a frying pan on his balcony, which is a way to, make some noise to let people know you're angry or you disagree with the policies that the government has implemented. And he was also, tear gas bombs are shot into the buildings where people are just, shouting and saying whatever they want. And they're shot into the buildings, and one of these tear gas bombs hit him, and he fell from the balcony and died. I would like to say that sometimes it feels like this is our opinion, but I think very known NGOs worldwide have, made this case very clear. Especially Amnesty International has been very helpful, letting the world know what's going on. I think today or yesterday they started a public campaign through the web to ask, the protests, the repression to stop. And this is basically our demand right now. I'm also here, I want to make this clear, because I'm now a member of a political party which has been somehow targeted as one of the main actors behind all the protests. The national coordinator of our political party is in jail right now. At the beginning he was sent to jail because they blamed him of the deaths. Now we know it's not true, but he's still in jail since the beginning of the protest. It's almost 2 months now. The offices of our political party have been, taken over by policemen with guns, with no warrant whatsoever. There have been mayors that were elected a couple of months ago that have been sent to jail with no, clear accusations of whatsoever. And just a couple of days ago, I think yesterday or the day before, one of these paramilitary groups went into the Justice Tribunal and asked to outlaw our political party, to ban it. And it's interesting because they found, they claim all their things based on a law, which is called the Law Against Organized Crime and Terrorist Financing. That's the law that they're using right now to imprison political leaders, to imprison students. They mentioned it, more than 2,000 students have been detained, hundreds injured, more than 600. More than 100 of those 600 have been injured by gunshots. So that's why one of the demands that Andreina read is, unarm these groups who has the guns. I haven't seen one picture of a student with a shotgun or with a gun of any type. Not one. But there are many pictures with people with armed guns, and many times they're sitting or standing right near the National Guard. I mean, there are tens of videos that I hope we will have the opportunity to see at any point. One of the ones that I remember right now, it's more disgusting, is a National Guard member, a woman. She stands up over another woman who was actually not even in the protest. She was only taking pictures of what was going on. And she takes her helmet and starts hitting her in the face several times. And I mean, if you said this to the government, they will say, no, well, we have sent these people to jail. Sometimes they have. But when you see this behavior happening one time over another, you ask yourself if this is, I mean, something that's happening by chance because an angry policeman decided to do it, or if it's actually someone in this forces that is actually promoting this. I mean, and I think it's the second one. I'm sorry to say, but I think it is. I mean, it's been 2 months and the situation remains. So, I don't want to go any further. I think you have the most interesting things to tell us, maybe questions to ask them that are there right now, or any of us. I think there are a lot of Venezuelans here also in the audience. But I really appreciate the opportunity for us to be here today. Thank you.
So what we are going to do next is that we are going to ask Maina to come and say a word to us, to salute the public, tell us what you do. We'd like to very much hear what you do. How is it that you could receive our messages and so forth. And then we're going to open the floor for comments, and we're going to open the opportunity for our students to come forward to answer your questions. So we're going to welcome Maina. I'm so sorry to have this sketchy setup. We're going to have you sit here and stand by, and we will then open the floor for questions. We do have a request from Caracas in one of the UN camps that you saw in our picture. One of the students have asked to be called in. So while you talk, technically I'm going to try to reach her, and then she will come via Skype. But please welcome Maina Kai for your kind visit.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for coming out to this event, and thank you, Irene, and everybody else who's organized it. And I feel very touched and very privileged, and also very humbled by what I'm hearing and what's going on in Venezuela. Very briefly, because I think this setup is for me to hear more from you as opposed to me telling you. Let me just tell you a little bit about my mandate. And so the UN, my mandate was created in 2010. I started in 2011, and so I'm now in my third year. Excuse me. And then basically I follow the issue